Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Adrienne Ross Show. Maybe you're listening at the BMGnetwork.com or listening on a major podcast platform or watching on the BMG Network's YouTube channel. So however you're tuned in, I am glad you are. And this is February. So I'm just going to say it. Happy Black History Month. And I'm curious, what's your reaction to that greeting? Happy Black History Month. Do you say, oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah, happy Black History Month. Or is your mindset, Black History Month? What? Why are we doing that? And I asked that question because who would think that Black History Month would be controversial? But it is. It actually is. And there are people who are adamant. I'm talking adamant about not celebrating Black History Month. And there are people who feel like it is absolutely important. And so since Black History Month is in February, and this is February, and I'm curious about what you think, I want to talk about that today. Now, see, when I was growing up, it was just a given. Now, I was growing up in Long Island, New York. You know, you did things for Black History Month. You had programs in schools for Black History Month and churches and, you know, different things like that. You just did. And when I became a teacher, teaching high school first and then 7th grade English in Upstate New York, Black History Month was just a part of what we did. And then as the time went on, you started hearing things out there seem to be attached to people's politics somehow. And you hear people start really kind of blasting the whole idea of Black History Month. And I went through that myself. I have to say that I was very torn for a time about it. And I can talk a little bit about that. But it was one of those things I did when I started teaching. I still remember when I was hired, I was the only Black teacher in our district. And I remember my first day, I may have shared this before, my first day of teaching, I was doing 9th and 10th grade. And I parked my car and walked through that parking lot, and kids, they're there already because the buses come early. And obviously this was September. This was in New York. This was September. This has nothing to do with Black History Month, this greeting, the way they greeted me, but you'll see why I'm bringing this up. So as I am approaching the building, I'm walking through students who are hanging out because they got there early or whatever. And I still remember, I'll never forget, as I walked through that door, people began to applaud. And that spoke volumes to me because I was the only, like I said, Black teacher. I mean, in fact, I had been called by the newspaper to answer questions about how I felt about being the only Black teacher in the district. And I had no idea I was going to be the only Black teacher in the district. I knew that the district I worked in was very diverse, which was one of the reasons why I wanted to work for them. But I never thought that I'm the only Black teacher. I mean, it just wasn't, look, I had a job, okay? I was glad I was a teacher, period, right? So anyway, but they began to applaud. And that spoke to me because they were saying that they could, for those who were Black, I'm sure they were saying that there was someone they could identify with in that way. We can identify with people in different ways, but in that way, and it obviously mattered to them. And then if they were white students, it was like, wow, I've never, because I've had, been very close to students who are not Black, and they're like, wow, and they'll still write on social media sometimes, I've seen it, that she was the only Black teacher I had, and that mattered to them, So it was kind of interesting, but I remember, now how does this have to do with Black History Month? I remember students saying, oh, wow, we got a Black teacher, saying to me, does that mean we're going to do something for Black History Month now? Because apparently, and I know this is true even later in my teaching, the students would ask about doing things for Black History Month. And a response that they had gotten or would get would be, we don't have time for that. We've got other things that we have to do. And although I understand, I guess, you do have a curriculum, you do have things you have to follow. There's a way that you say things to people. And when you say we don't have time for that, you're basically telling them that who they are and their history aren't important. And so that was an issue concerning, Black History Month. But I am not I did things for Black History Month, and I'm not saying that, whatever we do in terms of of Black history should be left in February. That was one of my issues, that there was too much there to just confine to a month, and we should continue to be learning about everyone's history, right? That's important. But I say this, to the people who said you shouldn't be celebrating Black History Month. I told you I've been torn at times, all in at times, other times torn. But one of the things about being all in was addressing people who said, you shouldn't, this shouldn't be a Black History Month, and I said to people, if it's supposed to be special, it should be special all the time. If it's special. And I say to that, well, we celebrate our children. If you have children or your or friends, you celebrate their birthday on a certain day, although you celebrate it all year. So that's not a good answer. I celebrate your life. If you're my child, I'm going to celebrate that God gave you to me. I'm going to celebrate your life every day. But that does not mean that I can't still have a special day that I celebrate you in a bigger way, like your birthday. So that's not a good reason. But I've heard people say that, you shouldn't have to, But the other thing is that some people think, okay, you can just confine it to a month. No, there's more to it than that. It's history, period, right? So there's that. Now, let me just share with you some of the issues that I have had dealing with doing Black History Month and dealing with individuals and how they think about it. I still remember the time a student said, I had them write about Black history, whether we should celebrate it, Black History Month, whether we should celebrate it or not. And one student actually said, why should we celebrate a race of people who can't even talk right? Oh, that did not go over well. Dims did some fighting words, but that's how he felt. And that's what he wrote, and that's what he shared. And it was on up in there. But that's what he said. Why do we celebrate a group of people, who can't? They can't even talk right. Wow. That's deep. That's a whole issue that needed to be dealt with in terms of his feelings and his thoughts, right? But I've also had people say, I still remember this, well, there's no White History Month. Why should there be Black History Month? And I still remember a white student, who said, every month is White History Month. And that was deep. And it was coming from a white student who recognized that a white person never walks into a classroom and thinks, I wonder if we'll learn about, something from someone who's white. You don't even think about it because it's there. It's always there. And you don't even notice it because you don't notice the thing that's always there. You notice the thing that's not there. So that's the thing too. I thought, wow, that's a powerful thing. And that, again, I'm bringing this out. I'd love to have a panel of people have this conversation because it really is a heated conversation for many people. And I had been torn, like I said, all in at times because it's a great opportunity to teach and discuss and do things that people don't always get to do. And it's special, like that birthday. But I've also been at times when I'm just like, you know what, let's just learn, period. Why has it got to be Black History? Because actually, if you go back, when it started, it was Black History Week, right? But my understanding is that it was never intended to remain something that needed to be done. The belief was that you would present this valuable information and this important history, and that it would be so embraced that it would at one point not be needed at all. Right? It would just be a part of our culture and what we do, and that was from my understanding, that was the way it was supposed to be. It wasn't supposed to be all these years later, we have to have a Black History Month. But again, I still feel like why not? But anyway, that's a little bit of my battle. Another battle that I have, and this is really touchy, but another battle that I have was that as a teacher, you get like Black students who would say, we never do nothing for about Black people. And I asked so-and-so why we don't learn about more Black people. And she told me she didn't have time and they're all racist and, that whole thing. Okay. So I am a Black teacher, and I do teach them things about Black people, not just in Black History Month, but one of the things that I really love to do, and it had nothing to do with necessarily with Black History Month, but it was literature, it was poetry. I love Maya Angelou. I love Langston Hughes. Okay, and so those were two poets that I would share with my students all the time, and it was so powerful. You know, their poetry so powerful, their message so powerful, right? And everyone can relate to the poems that I would do in particular. But anything that I would do for Black History Month, for example, I noticed that for the most part, if there were any students who weren't going to do it, the homework, the assignment, guess who they were? Yeah, the Black people. And I'm not trying to be cruel or anything, but I'm trying to figure out how you, as a Black person, okay, you want to complain that nobody's embracing your history, nobody's presenting your history, none of that. But then when you've got assignments and you've got opportunities to do things and discuss and write and read and stuff, you the one, excuse my bad English, you the one came in and don't have your work. And I know we're all one race, but God has also made us distinct and diverse, and we can celebrate that uniqueness and all that. So let's not pretend that we don't see color. I can't stand when people say, I never see color. I'm like, you lying, number one. And number two, if you ain't lying, you crazy. I don't mean to call you crazy. But it's okay to recognize differences. It's okay to recognize this is a girl, this is a boy, this person is Chinese, this person is African American. I don't use the term African American usually, but Black, that's a whole different story. It's okay. But why? I'm like, you're the Black person, and this is your history, and you don't want to do your work. But you want everybody else to love your work. You want everybody else to want to do your poetry, and you don't want to do your poetry. You want everybody else to learn about the accomplishments of your people, and yet you don't get your homework done. And that was not all Black students. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying, generally speaking, for the most part, from my career, which was almost 20 years, if anybody wasn't doing the Black history homework or things that pertain to our history, it was the Black people. And that sounds horrible to say, and I hate to say it, but it's true. And I would tell them, I can run my mouth, and I would do it. You're upset because somebody else doesn't respect your background, and you don't respect it enough to do anything about it. So that will come out too. Not trying to get off on all that stuff, but these are just the different aspects that I've experienced over the years when it came to Black History Month. It was a wonderful thing, and for some, it was a thing like, why do we have to do this for others? And regardless, the history is rich and important, right? And so I'm curious, like in this day and age, this is 2022 right now. In this day and age, are we in our schools? What are our thoughts about Black history? Are we doing? When I was growing up, like I said, we did assemblies and all that stuff. When I was a child, student, we didn't do assemblies and all that. When I was as a teacher, it had already changed. Like I said, kids were saying, man, they say we don't have time. And I'm sure there were some who did stuff. But when I walked in, they said, we got a Black teacher. I remember that question. Does that mean we're going to start doing stuff for Black History Month? I remember that. That speaks volumes to me. That means it matters. And so although I went back and forth at times about it and took a break, I think at some point, ultimately, I think I came back to it because it matters to people. Maybe you say it shouldn't matter, but why not? Why can't we celebrate differences? Why can't we recognize that there are people? I've always said this, when you don't talk, and I'm not just talking about Black History Month, but I'm talking about Black history in general, right? If you don't talk about it, if you, like, for example, when we talk about like accomplishments and inventions, let's say we talk about inventions, right? I mean, maybe it's a sad thing that we even have to talk about it. A Black person invented that. A Black person invented, it's like really, like, are we really at that point where it's like, I got to stroke you that way? And that's again, a whole different story, because that's a real issue. And that's something that we could spend a whole lot of time talking about. But back to my point, what ends up happening is if you don't talk about the accomplishments of certain people, the assumption is that they didn't accomplish anything worth talking about, because If they did, you'd be talking about it, right? And how do I know that we assume that they haven't? Why? Because you say to a student, for example, a black person invented X, Y, and Z. A black person performed the first successful open heart surgery, or whatever it is. And the eyes go, what? Black, white, otherwise, there's that surprise. Well, why would there be a surprise? Right? The like, what? Really? That shows that whether they realize it or not, they assumed otherwise. And I think that's the value, because everyone needs to know, even though we should be identifying on all different levels, that's a real issue for people. It's a part of our identity and who we are. And especially when you're dealing with the background that we're dealing with, and the history that we're dealing with and stuff. It's important for people to feel that they have, that they're a part of something that's big and that has contributed and all that. And they should care about that. So that's interesting. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about that today, because it remains really a sore subject for some. And there's some of you who are thinking, really? It is? It really is for some. I mean, people go on rants about Black History Month, whether what they do in school, whether they do it, in their families, or they do it at church and in the community. There's some people who, it's a real issue for them. And other people are adamant about doing it. They think it's valuable. And other people are listening right now, and they're so, political, because this has become political, that it's like, we're so tired of hearing about Black this, Black that. Wow, we're all just this, yeah, and that's something that speaks to your heart, and you've got, speaks to what's in your heart, and you've got to deal with that, because there's an issue, and whatever the issue is, that's the issue that should be dealt with. But what do you think? Black, whether and of course I've heard people say, well, I don't have any. Well, we don't do it because I don't really have any Black kids in my class. Is Black history just for Black kids, or is it history? And then that's an opportunity, to share. And whether you're doing it in February because that's Black History Month, which is there because of Lincoln's birthday, as well as Frederick Douglass's. But that's a side issue. But again, I just wanted to throw that out. I'm thinking about it, wondering what people are thinking, hoping that it's not too sore of a subject, and that we could say, why not? If it's going to bless anyone, if it's going to be a help to anyone, if it's going to be part of our history that we should be sharing, and we want to set aside something special, why not? That's what I settled on. But I like I said, I struggled. But anyway, I'm going to just share a poem. I love, like I said, Langston Hughes, and one of the poems that I really love from Langston Hughes is called Mother to Son. And I was fortunate because in my family, like with Langston Hughes, some of his poetry would come into our home, and then we would have assemblies, so I have to remember it. But Mother to Son was a poem that I share with my students, and what I love about it is that the message, it's well, you'll hear the dialect in it, and so you can assume that the mother is Black, but at the same time, the message can be grabbed onto, and it can be inspiring to everyone. And that's what my students found. Okay, so Mother to Son by Langston Hughes. Well, son, I tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, places with no carpet on the floor. Bare. But all the time I've been climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps because you finds it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now. For I still going, honey. I still climbing. And life for me ain't meant no crystal stair. Why are you snapping your fingers? If you know anything about poetry, you know that after you share poetry, you're supposed to snap your fingers, right? Imagine a whole class of 7th graders doing that. Such a powerful poem. Such a positive message. And such a way to open up and teach about Langston Hughes' life. Because he had an interesting life. and then share some of his poetry, this being one of them. And you don't have to wait till February to do that. It doesn't have to just be about Black History Month. Black history, all of our histories, too rich to just put in one spot. But it is a good place to put it if you're saying, you know what, I want to acknowledge this. So again, you don't have to agree with me about it. I've been back and forth about it, so I understand. But ultimately, history is important. Black history is equally important, and why not? So go as you go. You celebrate your kids day after day after day. That doesn't mean that you can't also celebrate them on their birthday. It's okay. We don't have to disagree about we don't have to make everything a big disagreement. I don't want to do Black history. The liberals want to, the Republicans want, everybody, can we just enjoy and learn and grow and not fight about everything, including Black History Month? So anyway, AdrienneRossCom@gmail.com is my email address. Feel free to email me. Curious to see what you would say about all this stuff with an open mind. So, feel free to reach out. Thank you for this kind of different episode of the Adrienne Ross Show. Of course, everything's different here, right? I always say A to Z, Adrienne is on it. So I don't know if I can call it different. It just, for some reason, it feels different. But thank you for tuning in to the Adrienne Ross Show on the BMG Network. Please leave a review. Go to a major podcast platform like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, something like that you can leave, where you can leave a message. And I would really appreciate it. When I say leave a message, I mean a comment, but also a rating and a review. Love that 5-star rating, and love for you to write a review. It would be so helpful. People are like, it's a review, it doesn't matter. No, it does. Please do that for me, okay? If you enjoy the Adrienne Ross Show. Also, go to the BMGnetwork.com and check out the other wonderful podcasts that we have there. We have some wonderful podcasters, and I'd love for you to check them out. We are engaging, insightful, informative, and entertaining also. All right? So I will catch you next time on the Adrienne Ross Show. God bless you abundantly. The Adrienne Ross Show was produced and edited in the BMG studio. The music was provided by Kevin MacLeod. Find more episodes of The Adrienne Ross Show at thebmgnetwork.com and major podcast platforms. Be sure to tune in regularly. You don't want to miss even one episode.